joined here today with Phil Hyman, Bloomberg Southeast Asia government reporter based in Singapore. So today we're going to talk about how Singapore is making moves to reopen its economy, but the number of COVID cases in some communities are still continuing to surge. So Phil, let's just get into the thick of things. Before the start of April, Singapore had a total number of confirmed cases at below around 1,000. And now it's at about 20,000. So how did that happen within a few weeks?
Well, you have worker dormitories that house hundreds of thousands of people, at least 200,000 people living in purpose-built dormitories alone. And, these are often crammed quarters that have it could be at least 10 people sharing one unit, and they're quite small. Shared facilities, including kitchens, bathrooms, things like that. So, conditions at these places are not great. These are places that were not well addressed when the outbreak first began here in January. So, we started to see a gradual build of cases after a couple of months. And when you have such close quarters, it's hard to prevent the disease from spreading.
So how is the government sort of dealing with this great spread? How are they dealing with the surge of infections in workers' dormitories?
Well, they've done quite a lot so far since then. They no longer allow daily movement of workers in and out of the dormitories. They've deployed teams of doctors, nurses, technicians to each of the 43 purpose-built dorms. More than 10,000 workers in essential services have been moved out and progressively tested so they can continue to work safely. They've stepped up in inspections at housing facilities of foreign workers and enhanced checks to ensure that living conditions are acceptable and that safe distancing measures are adhered to. At the same time, they've also increased the number of beds. 18,000 have been created for isolation, and medical care needs.
So they're moving. Yeah. Are they moving the workers out of the dormitories?
They've moved some of them out, right? So at least 10,000 people have been moved out, but the great majority of them have been stuck inside of the buildings.
Okay, so stay in place, and then some of them are being moved out.
That's right.
How do you think this will affect the migrant workers going forward? How are their lives going to change? How are their living and working conditions going to change?
Well, hopefully for the better. I mean, at this exact time, they're talking about how they're going to deal with the situation in the future. Singapore being a country that learns from its prior experiences, for example, with SARS, and how well they were prepared at the onset of this pandemic. So they're currently discussing ways to settle the workers in the dorms afterwards and to do so sustainably. So hopefully for the better.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, your Minister of National Development did say that Singapore wasn't nearly at the halfway mark yet. So that begs me to ask, is Singapore actually ready to reopen?
Well, there's lots of opinions about this, but the short of it is this: while the overwhelming majority of the cases, now over 20,000 in Singapore, at least 85% are at the dormitories themselves. They seem to be confined there, while cases in the wider community are far less. It could be 10 or 15 in a day, or even less, in single digits, as we've seen over the past week. So, when you look at it in that context, you have 5.7 million people here. The economy has taken a huge hit since January, and at some point you're going to have to reopen the economy. So, whether that sooner or later will have to be determined based on, whether cases are continuing to arise or not. But the current trend is showing a decline in community cases, so that's a positive sign.
I'm glad to hear that. Your Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong also did say that there would be significant structural changes to the Singaporean economy. Can you kind of list some of those changes could possibly be?
Well, a lot of that can be seen through the pandemic itself. What industries have thrived: delivery, medical supplies, things of that nature have really done quite well during the pandemic. And so there would be an opportunity there to expand on those services once the so-called circuit breaker measures are lifted.
Oh, that's good to hear. All right, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much again, Philip Hymans, for your time and explaining a little bit more about Singapore's situation to us. Thanks
Thank you
again.
for having me.
No worries. Thank you, Phil. Bye for now.